Bruce Lee was practicing when 6 feet 4 inches beast said you're soft, 3 seconds later crushed. Bruce Lee was practicing when 6 feet 4 inches beast said you're soft, 3 seconds later crushed. Bruce Lee adjusted his GI in one swift motion, his fingers sliding across the rough fabric as his eyes remained fixed on the dojo mirror. Sweat ran down his temples, but his breathing was controlled, almost imperceptible. The Chisaw routine flowed like water, every touch, every deflection, a dance of precision. He was alone, as he always preferred, when the door creaked. "You're training wrong, boy." The voice was deep, full of disdain. Bruce didn't need to turn around to know that the man who had entered was immense. 6 feet 4 inches of dense muscle, shoulders as broad as a bull, hands the size of dinner plates. The stranger wore a sleeveless t-shirt, showing off arms covered in scars and old gang tattoos. His eyes, small and dark, sparkled with a confidence that bordered on insult. Bruce stopped his movement, but didn't turn around. Maintain a relaxed posture, knees slightly bent. "And how do you train, then?" The big man laughed, a hoarse, humorless sound. "With strength. With pain. You there, dancing like a ballerina, you're soft. Weak." Bruce felt heat rise to his neck, but his expression remained neutral. He knew men like that, brutes who confused violence with skill, size with power. And he knew that, against them, anger was a weapon that they themselves wielded best. "Force without control is nothing," said Bruce, turning slowly. "And pain without purpose is waste." The giant snorted, taking a step forward. The ground shook slightly under his weight. "Let's see if you say that after I break your doll nose." Bruce didn't back down. Instead, he tilted his head, as if assessing a troublesome student. 3 seconds, he said, almost in a whisper. "What? You said I was soft. I'll give you 3 seconds to prove me wrong." The man laughed, throwing his head back. When he looked down, his eyes were bloodshot with fury. "Okay, Chinese. I'll show you what it is." He advanced. Bruce was already moving before the big man's fist left his waist. A sidestep, his body spinning like a top, and his right foot connected with his opponent's knee in a precise roundhouse kick. The crack was sharp, followed by a howl of pain. The giant staggered, but didn't fall, not yet. The second move was a feint. Bruce pretended to back away, drawing the man into a clumsy punch. As the fist whizzed past his ear, he grabbed the outstretched arm, twisted it with a Jeet Kune Do motion, and used his opponent's own momentum against him. A twist, a push, and the giant flew against the wall, the impact causing the plaster to crack. The 3rd second was not over yet. Bruce jumped, spinning in the air, and his heel connected with the man's chin with the force of a hammer. The big man's head hit the wall, and he collapsed to the floor, unconscious before he even hit the mat. Silence. Bruce took a deep breath, feeling his heart slow down. There was no satisfaction in victory, just confirmation of what I already knew. Brute force was like a hammer, useful, but blunt. He bent down, checking the man's pulse. Strong. Alive. When he got up, he heard footsteps behind him. A group of dojo students, attracted by the noise, stood at the door, eyes wide. "Sensei, what was that?" asked one of them, a young man with wide eyes. Bruce adjusted his gloves, taking his time. "A reminder," he said. "That size doesn't define strength. And that true martial art isn't about breaking bones, it's about not needing to break them." He walked to the door, passing the astonished students. In the hallway, he stopped for a moment, looking at the fallen man. "But sometimes," he muttered to himself, "you need to remind others of that." And with that, Bruce Lee left, leaving behind only the echo of a lesson that the world would take decades to understand. Final chapter, the weight of the lesson. The following days were marked by a heavy silence in the dojo. The students trained with more intensity, but avoided looking directly at Bruce, as if they were afraid that the same force that had knocked down the brute could, by mistake, hit them. The story of the confrontation spread quickly, not only among students, but throughout San Francisco's Chinatown, where rumors took wing and became legend. A week later, the man Bruce had faced appeared at the dojo door. It wasn't the same anymore. His face still bore the bruises, but his eyes didn't have the same fire as before. He entered slowly, as if each step hurt, and stopped in the center of the room, where the students stopped their exercises to watch him. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice hoarse. "And thank you." Bruce, who was adjusting the bands for a younger student, stopped. He looked at the man for a long moment before responding. "Apologies are not necessary." "But thanks, why?" The man hesitated, as if the words were difficult to find. "Because no one ever showed me I was wrong without humiliating me. You broke me, but you didn't break me. And that made me think." Bruce crossed his arms. "And what did you think?" "That I spent my life believing that strength was everything. That intimidating others made me more of a man. But now..." He looked at his own hands, large and calloused. "Now I see that I just became a bully. And bullies are just scared men." A murmur ran through the dojo. Bruce nodded slowly. "Fear is the true enemy. It doesn't matter if you are big or small. If you don't face it, it controls you." The man took a deep breath. "I want to learn. Not to fight. To understand." Bruce studied him for a moment, then turned to the students. "Who here thinks he deserves a chance?" No one responded immediately. Then, one of the younger men, the same one who had asked about the confrontation days before, stepped forward. "If Sensei says yes, then so do I." One by one, the others agreed. Bruce smiled, almost imperceptibly. "Then start tomorrow. 6 in the morning. Punctuality is the first lesson." The man bowed his head gratefully and left. The dojo returned to its normal rhythm, but something had changed. It was no longer just a training place. It was a refuge. Years later, in Hong Kong, Bruce Lee was on a film set when a man approached him. He wore an elegant suit, but his movements still carried the stiffness of someone who had spent years learning to control his own body. "Do you remember me?" asked the man. Bruce recognized him immediately. The same face, now without bruises, the same broad shoulders, but with a different posture. Less threatening. "Of course. The San Francisco bully." The man laughed, a genuine sound. "Today I own 3 gyms. I teach children to defend themselves, not attack." And it all started that day. Bruce adjusted his costume coat. "I'm glad to hear that. I just wanted to say, thank you. For not giving up on me before I even tried." Bruce looked at him, then at the cameras, the actors, the controlled chaos of a film in production. "Never give up on anyone. Not even yourself." The man nodded and said goodbye. Bruce stood still for a moment, watching him walk away. Maybe that was the real victory. Not the punch that had knocked down a giant, but the outstretched hand that had lifted him up afterwards. And, in a way, that's what he always wanted to teach. End. Of course. The San Francisco bully. The man laughed, a genuine sound, almost surprised that he still remembered that nickname. His eyes, once hard as stone, now shone with a tranquility that only time and the right choices could bring. "Today I own 3 gyms. I teach children to defend themselves, not attack." And it all started that day. He paused, as if reliving the scene in his memory. "You don't know how hard it was. After that fight, everyone looked at me differently. The guys in the neighborhood said I had become soft, that I had let an old man teach me a lesson. But I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. About how real strength wasn't about breaking others, but lifting yourself up." Bruce adjusted his costume coat, feeling the weight of the words. It wasn't the first time someone had thanked him for something that, for him, had just been a moment of mixed anger and compassion. But, of all the stories he had heard, this one seemed to carry something more. I'm glad to hear that. He hesitated, then added, how did you get here? I mean, how did you go from bully to teacher? The man crossed his arms, leaning lightly on the studio railing. The afternoon sun hid his face, illuminating the small scars that still marked his eyebrows, reminders of a time when violence was his only language. It was a process. He smiled, as if the answer was obvious. First, I just wanted to prove that I could be more than that. Then, I started training for real. Not just to fight, but to understand the body, discipline. One day, a boy from the neighborhood showed up at the gym where I worked out. Small, skinny, I got beaten up every day at school. He asked me to teach him how to defend himself. I said I wasn't a teacher, but he insisted. And then I saw it. He shook his head, as if he still didn't believe it. I saw that if I taught that boy how to stand, maybe he wouldn't need to be hit anymore. And suddenly, I wasn't just teaching techniques anymore. I was giving him something that no one had ever given me, a chance. Bruce listened in silence. Outside, the film set was moving at its frenetic pace, assistants shouting appointments, cameras being adjusted, the director gesturing to the next scene. But there, in that small space between two shots, the world seemed to slow down. What about gyms? Bruce asked. How did you manage to open 3? The man shrugged, as if it were simple. One step at a time. The first was in an old warehouse, with borrowed tatami mats and a heater that kept breaking. But the children came. And it wasn't just the bullies, no. They were the shy ones, the ones who were afraid of everything, the ones that no one else wanted around. I saw in them what I saw in myself, someone waiting for a reason to believe that they could be more. He laughed softly. The second academy came about because a student's father, who owned a chain of stores, offered me a loan. He said he had never seen a teacher so bad at charging monthly fees, but so good at getting students to come back. The third was because a former student of mine, that skinny kid who I taught to defend himself, grew up and wanted to be my partner. Bruce felt a warmth in his chest. It wasn't pride, it was something deeper, like a piece he didn't even know he was missing had finally fallen into place. Never give up on anyone. Not even yourself. The man nodded, his eyes moist. They weren't tears of sadness, but of something he still couldn't name. I just wanted to say, thank you. For not giving up on me before I even tried. Bruce held out his hand. The man held her firmly, but without the brute strength he had before. It was a grip of gratitude, of recognition. Life is strange, isn't it? Bruce said, letting go of his hand. Sometimes, we think we are teaching something, and in the end, we are the ones who learn. The man smiled, agreeing. Yeah. And the best lesson I learned was this: strength is not in how many people you knock down, but in how many you help get up. They stood there for a moment longer, two men from different worlds, united by a simple truth. Then the man waved goodbye, walking back to his life, a life that, years ago, he never imagined he would have. Bruce watched him walk away, then turned back to the set. The cameras were ready, the team was waiting. But before returning to character, he took a deep breath and smiled. Maybe that was the true role he always wanted to play, not the hero who defeats the villains, but the one who shows that no one needs to be one forever.